We began talking about Ori Miklat, and after the Chalukas Haaretz, which is already 14 years, right? 7 years of conquest, 7 years of division. Although there's still land that has not been conquered, remember that, that's still around. So the next thing Yoshua does is fulfill the mitzvah of designating Ori Miklat. Moshe had already done 3, Eber Yarden, and Yoshua designates another 3. And as the Gemara explains in Maseches Makos, the second parak of Makos is devoted to the laws of killing b'shogeg and Ori Miklat, that the 3 Eber Yarden didn't become activated till Yoshua designated the ones there, but Moshe Rabbeinu still wanted to do whatever mitzvah he was able to do, even if it was ultimately, it wasn't effective. By the way, an analogy to that is David HaMelech. Remember that David HaMelech was not allowed to build the Beis HaMikdash. He was actually not allowed to because he was a man of violence, a man of war, albeit mitzvah wars. And Hashem wanted the Beis HaMikdash to be built only by a person who was a person of shalom, and Shlomo HaMelech had peace all of his reign. But in the book of Divrei Hayamim, it tells us how David amassed huge amounts of gold and silver and copper for the Beis HaMikdash, that even though he couldn't build the Beis HaMikdash, he wanted to do whatever he could in terms of raising all of the resources. Moshe Rabbeinu was the same type of situation. Now, the Ir Miklat is a place for a person who kills b'shogeg. So let's talk about this a little bit, because there are really 3 terms you need to differentiate. There is what is called mezid, there is what is called shogeg, and there is what is called onus. And obviously, if you intend to kill somebody, you're called a mezid. A mezid is not protected by the Ir Miklat. Now, the interesting question is, this is a bit of an anomaly, because what happens to a mezid? The guy kills with premeditation. The guy kills intentionally. So it depends. If you have witnesses who are kosher witnesses, who are eyewitnesses, and they warned him not to do it, and he acknowledges the warning, and he kills, theoretically, he can be put to death, right? Murder, Ritzicha, Be'edim, and Asra is a capital offense. Now, it's true that the Gemara, the Mishnah in Makos says, a Sanhedrin that executed somebody once every 7 years, or even once every 70 years, like one opinion, was called a bloody Sanhedrin because they would always look for a way to get the guy off the hook. And Rabbi Akiva made the claim. In his time, they didn't have really a Sanhedrin, but he said that if he would be on the Sanhedrin, nobody would ever get killed. He'd find loopholes. But Lamaisa, Ritzicha B'Eden is a capital crime. And interestingly enough, the Goyal Hadam has a role there. The Goyal Hadam is the executioner. When a person killed b'mezid with witnesses, the Beis Din would tell the Goyal Hadam to do it. Could the Goyal Hadam turn it down and say, I'd rather not? Most of us might be very uncomfortable, murdering somebody. The answer is, yeah, you could turn it down, but the Goyal Hadam is given the first prerogative to kill. Okay. Now, what if a person kills b'mezid, but there is no warning? So here we have a little bit of a problem. The Beis Din does not impose a death penalty on him. So he's not chayav misa because there's no warning. He can't go to an Ir Miklat because an Ir Miklat is only for shogeg and not mezid. The question is this, is a person who kills b'mezid under circumstances where he's not going to be put to death by the Sanhedrin, is he vulnerable to the Goel Hadam? Now, it would seem, would it not, that it should all be a kal v'chomer. If a guy who kills b'shogeg, who steps out of the Ir Miklat, can be killed by the Goel Hadam, kal v'chomer, a mezid, should be killed, or can be killed, by the Goel Hadam. Now, if you make such a kal v'chomer, that would actually mean that the guy who kills b'mezid without witnesses is in a permanent state of danger. He has to hire his own security guards, whatever it is. On the other hand, it seems from the Makairis and Halacha that the Goyal Hadam only has a heter to kill the shogeg. And he does not have the heter to kill the mazid unless it's a mazid with hasra, in which case he's the executioner of the court. Which, to me, I don't understand the internal logic here, because to me, that actually means the mazid without warning gets a better deal than the shogeg. The shogeg is stuck to the Yer Miklat, and if he steps out of the Yer Miklat, he can be killed by the Goyal Adam. The mazid without warning doesn't go to the Yer Miklat, and the Goyal Adam doesn't have the right to kill him. Now, he still may be in danger, because even if the Goyal Adam doesn't have the right to kill him, the Goyal Adam might kill him anyway. So, you're in danger in that sense. But at least halachically, the guy who kills the mazid seems to have the best of both worlds, because he's not going to be executed by the Beis Din because he doesn't have warning. He can't be killed by the Goel Adam because he's not a shogeg who left the Yer Miklat. He doesn't have to go to the Yer Miklat because the Yer Miklat is only for shogegs. Now, granted, he is chayiv kares. God will punish him, etc., which is pretty bad. But in terms of what people can do to him, he actually has a good deal. So you can put this down as a question to ponder. That is, the horeg b'mezid below hasra seems to have less punishment than one who kills b'shogeg. Okay, but be it as it may, this is what a mezid is. A mezid is an intention to kill. And by the way, the Gemara in Makkos darshans that any intention to commit homicide will make you a mezid for purposes of not going to the Yer Miklat. Let's say, for example, I intended to kill Ruvain, the guy there, and instead I missed my mark and I killed Shimon. Now, this is an interesting case. What is the halacha when you had kavana to kill, but you killed a person different than the one you had kavana to kill? So the truth of the matter is you don't get the death penalty. Even if you were warned, you're only chayav misa if you kill the person you intended to kill. So you're not going to get the death penalty, but you also don't go to the Yer Miklat. So it's the same situation. Mezid without hasra would also cover, the principle would cover a situation of mezid even with hasra, where he killed a person different than the one he intended. So my question is going to be there as well, that he seems to get a better deal than the one who kills b'shogeg. Again, that's just something to think about. I actually don't have a teretz for that particular setup. Okay. Now, what's a shogeg? So mezid is intention to kill. Right? The man intended to kill. This would correspond in the secular legal system to murder, first-degree murder, premeditation to kill somebody. Shogeg actually corresponds to the secular legal term manslaughter. The difference between murder and manslaughter is murder requires intention to kill. Yeah, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but I'm not going to give you a law school class. Manslaughter is when a person is negligent, careless, didn't take the precautions that an ordinary person would take. You go through a red light. You go through an intersection without checking if there are children in the intersection. You didn't intend to kill anybody. You were on your cell phone, whatever it would be. You throw a heavy object out of your window just as garbage, and you didn't realize somebody would get hit by it. The point I'm making is that in order to be chayiv to go to the Yer Miklat, there has to be a certain negligence, a certain peshia, a certain indifference to life. If something is truly an unavoidable accident, that is not called shogeg at all. That is called onus. So an example would be, I'm driving a car and the brakes stop working. So, God forbid, the driver kills somebody. But there was no carelessness on his part. Now, again, you see how it depends? If the pshat is he knows the brakes are bad, but he figures he can drive around a little bit, that would make it a shogeg. But if the brakes were working fine and all of a sudden they just, whatever it is, the brake line's just ripped, that would be an onus. Okay, so it's important to understand, therefore, that the ir miklat is only for people in the middle. It's not for the mazid, and it's not for the onus. And of course, the onus, for sure, the goel adam cannot attack. It is only for the shogeg. And the shogeg requires a certain element of what we call negligence, culpability, indifference. And it is, it's obvious it's not going to track the legal system totally, but it is very, very similar to the idea of manslaughter, meaning the difference in murder and manslaughter is fundamentally the difference between mazid and shogeg. And anything that doesn't involve negligence or peshia is called ones. And ones already, you're patra l'gavri. It's not considered any type of sin. Yeah.
Today, we're seeing more and more self-driving vehicles. So in that case, if the car were to kill someone, is that an onus? Or is it peshia or negligent that they chose to get in a self-driving car?
Yeah, well, those are very, very excellent questions. Do they actually have self-driving cars operating on the roads? I know that.
I think it's in preliminary.
Yeah. The self-driving cars raise a lot of questions, especially if you're the programmer, you're devising the program. So the interesting question would be, obviously, if you see the accident coming and you have a manual override, that might make you a shogeg in not using the override. If there's no manual override and you're kind of stuck and the car is just on its own, so the interesting question is it a pshia per se to get such a vehicle? I would say not, because in many, many ways, as strange as it is, I could not drive I could not be in a self-driving vehicle. I would be terrified. But many, many people say it is safer. The reaction times are better, whatever it be. So to say that it's negligence to get a self-driving vehicle, I think is not true, because they are actually safer in the long run.
Would the owner of the vehicle be fired in halacha, or the programmer? Or if it was a mess up in the software?
Yeah, the programmer would not be chayav. Basically nobody would be chayav, I think, because the programmer might be negligent, but this is too much of a grama. This is too far removed from the ma'aser ritzicha. So I do something that causes the car when it reaches that certain phenomenon. So the programmer or even the manufacturer would not be chayav ir miklat because of grama, and the driver would not be chayav because of onus, etc. But it is complicated. Let me give you an example of a typical self-driving issue that actually may contradict halacha. What is the halacha? These are the famous trolley problems. Now with self-driving cars, you're going to have these. There's a whole branch of moral philosophy that's called trolley cases. You may have seen it in college. The founder of these problems was a professor of philosophy at Cambridge University. Her name was Philippa Foot. Now, why am I mentioning her? I'm mentioning her because it happens to be she was the daughter of the U.S. President Grover Cleveland, and she married a guy from England, and she went over to Cambridge and became a very distinguished philosopher. Now, Grover Cleveland is interesting. What do you know about Grover Cleveland? Until Donald Trump, Grover Cleveland was the only U.S. president that had 2 terms that were not consecutive. And now Trump has duplicated Grover Cleveland's special thing. And it's interesting that, I don't know what the spiritual significance is, but somehow Philippa Foot comes up, Grover Cleveland's daughter, Trump, whatever. A lot of kasharim here of no significance I can figure out, but I don't know. something must be going on. Maybe it's a yard site or something. I don't know. But the trolley problems are the question of killing some people to save other people. And the classic example is you're a trolley driver, right? You're driving a light rail train, and there are 10 kids playing on the track, and all of a sudden you see the brakes aren't going to work. I can't stop in time. So if I do nothing, I'm going to kill 10 people. But if I turn the train onto a side track, which normally has no people, but there's one worker who fell asleep on the track, pretty stupid. So the question is, am I allowed to swerve the train away from the 10 in order to save the 10, even if I'm going to kill the 1? Now, philosophically, if you looked at things from a utilitarian perspective, meaning greatest good for the greatest number, one might very well conclude better that one guy should die instead of 10 people dying. So Nebuch, I'm going to kill that guy, so be it. However, halachically, most poskim would say you are not allowed to kill 1 to save 10. The example would be the famous case where the goyim surround the city and they say, give us one person, one Jew that we will kill, or we will wipe out the whole city. The halacha is we cannot deliver somebody to be killed, even if the whole city gets wiped out. So based on that cheshbon, right, it would appear that you wouldn't be allowed to turn the trolley. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that self-driving vehicles are programmed to deal with exactly that eventuality. You're driving along and it sees that you're going to hit 5 people, but if you swerve, it makes exactly the calculation. If you swerve, you'll kill 1 person. The car is programmed. I mean, it depends, but at least in some of the models, the car is programmed to swerve in order to maximize the survivability of life. So you actually have a car that will make decisions that are contrary to halacha. Now, do I have to investigate that? I mean, how am I supposed to know every city? Maybe I could ask a few sample questions, but this car is programmed to deal with 1 million, 2 million things. How am I supposed to know exactly how each decision is going to be carried out and whether it'll be al pi halacha? And am I responsible for that? Meaning, I'm not doing anything. I didn't swerve the car. The car swerved on its own because it's programmed. Is that part of my HaRav? It's a fascinating question. By the way, as a little aside, let me just digress. The pashtus of the trolley situation is shevi al tasa, meaning I do nothing. So I let the train go straight. If it kills 10, that's fine. I mean, not fine, but I'm not allowed to do a maaseh that will kill 1 guy in order to save 10. I do want to point out there is one great gadol who is cholek in that, and that is the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish actually differentiates. He doesn't mention the trolley case, but he mentions a case that's mamish the same. He talks about deflecting a weapon. Let's say a weapon, a bomb. His case is an arrow, but whatever. An arrow is going into a crowd, and somehow the arrow or the bomb is going to kill 5 people. You can deflect the bomb to go into a place where it'll only kill 1 person. The Chazon Ish says, in such a situation, you are permitted to deflect the weapon away from the 5 to kill the 1, because that is not called an act of murder, that is called an act of rescue. Meaning, unlike the case where the goyim say, we're going to spare the city only if you give us somebody to kill, so then you become a participant in a murder. Here, the murder is only a collateral consequence. In other words, the reason why the 5 people are saved is not because the 1 person is getting killed. If he wouldn't be there, it would even be better. In other words, it's not the ritzicha that is saving the 5. It's the deflection of the weapon. So the Chazon Ish Taina is a maisa hatzola you can indeed endanger some people to save a larger number. This is very nogea, for example, in shooting down a suicide plane. Let's say that you have, like 9/11 type situation. A plane is heading towards the World Trade Center, etc. If it hits, let's say it's going to probably kill 1,000 people, but we can shoot it down. Now, if the only people on the plane are terrorists, Ein Chinami, they're road trip, but the plane has 200 people. So Lamaisa, Lagabi, those 200 people, there's another svara. They're going to die anyway. That's a different svara. They're going to die anyway, so you're not killing them. Okay, but you don't need the Chazon Ish for that svara. But where you need the Chazon Ish is the following: if we shoot down the plane, not only will the people on the plane die, but it's going to crash in a residential neighborhood, and other people are going to die who otherwise wouldn't have died. So am I allowed to save 1,000 people by shooting down a plane that's going to kill 5 people who wouldn't have died otherwise? So that's the trolley case. Most poskim say, Usser, the Chazon Ish would matter it. But you see, that's not relevant to the shooting down the people on the plane, because they're going to die ben kach u'ben-kach. Okay, so how do we get onto this? Oh, self-driving cars. Okay, yeah.
We can say utilitarianism is something that is a hashkafa at all that exists in Judaism, because with the example of the self-driving car, it's not a yid that's making the decision, it's the car. So it could be something that we still value, whether we might not be able to do it.
Well, I think number one, the question becomes though, if the Jew buys the car knowing that these things happen, so that does that create a certain responsibility for what's going on, right? So the fact that the Yid is not making the decisions b'shas ma'aseh may not totally exonerate him from that. Okay. So be it as it may, for in terms of where miklat, the important thing is to be aware of the 3 categories of mezid, of shogeg, of ones. Mezid and ones don't have Borei miklat. Shogeg does. It roughly corresponds to murder versus manslaughter versus unavoidable homicide, which is, you don't go to prison for that at all. I will point out, however, that some cases of shogeg are so negligent that they become karav l'mezid. So the Gemara says there are certain types of extreme recklessness, like driving, let's say, maybe 100 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood, that even though technically you didn't have kavana to kill, but it may be upgraded to mezid. So it's a little more tricky, because even though there are 3 basic categories, mezid, shogeg, ones, but there's an intermediate category called karov l'mezid. And karov l'mezid would also not have the benefit of Ir Miklat. Yeah.
Is there any connection to the U.S. legal systems? Like there's the involuntary manslaughter versus voluntary manslaughter. Is there any in shogeg with those both found or shogeg, or is it kind of not really?
Yeah, I would think that anything that would qualify as manslaughter, whether voluntary or involuntary, would be shogeg. So
Right.
shogeg would embrace, because again, involuntary manslaughter is a bit of a misnomer. Because if something is truly involuntary, it wouldn't be manslaughter. I mean, if I'm standing on a roof and the building collapses, God forbid, and my weight falls on a child, that's not a shogeg. I don't go to an Ir Miklat
Right.
there unless I knew that maybe the roof was dangerous. Yeah.
Does the situation change if the 10 people in front of you are Jewish and the one person that you could kill?
Yeah, well, this is not politically correct, but it does in fact change. The Minchas Chinuch says, it's a chiddush, and we normally don't mention this, that what is the reason why you can't kill one life to save other lives? So the reason the Gemara says is because who says your blood is any better? So the Minchas Chinuch says the life of, even though you're not allowed to kill a non-Jew normally, that's for sure, but the life of a Jew is more precious, and therefore the Minchas Chinuch says you're allowed to kill a non-Jew in order to save the life of a Jew. So in such a situation, you would be allowed to do that. But as they say, that halacha could be potentially very controversial. Again, be sure you understand me. I'm not saying you're allowed to kill non-Jews. I mean, there is an Isser D'Oraisa of Ritzicha towards non-Jews as well, but all I'm saying is, it'll be nitche for the pikuach nefesh of a Jew. That's all the Mesiach is saying. Okay, so we have these three categories. So the Ir Miklat is for the shogeg. Now, let's point out a little bit. People raised the question that in the Jewish system of punishments, there is no prison system, right? For theft, there's financial penalties and the like, and then there's what are the onshim? We have a korban, we have mammon, we have kanas, we have malchus, we have misa, different types of misa. But there's no concept of going to jail. There's nothing tantamount to prison. Even though prison is mentioned in the Chumash, Paro, but besides Paro, that when Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what to do with someone, he put him in the mishmar, he put him in a jail cell. But that's like pre-trial detention. That's not the punishment, that's just waiting so we know what the sentence is. The closest thing we have to jail is Ir Miklat. But Ir Miklat is not jail. Remember, Ir Miklat is actually a regular city, and in fact, all of the Orei Miklat are cities of Levium. So the permanent population of an Ir Miklat is a city of Levium, which makes room for the Rotzchim to be in that city. So you're not in a jail cell, you're in a city. There are stores, there are Batei Medrash, there are shuls, right? You live your life within that city. You're not allowed to leave that city. You're kind of stuck to that city. So Lubavitcher Rebbe once had a very interesting observation about what the ideal prison system is. Because if you think about prison, I assume, I certainly hope that none of you have ever been in jail for different offenses. But prison, one of the terms for prison is penitentiary. It's an older term for a jail, prison. Penitentiary actually comes from the word penitence, that you're sent to prison to do tshuva, to be misbonein over your life, to do a cheshbon hanefesh, to do tshuva, and come back to God. Well, prison is not a great place to do tshuva, although some do, actually some people do. Prison, who are you surrounded with? Who are your influences? Who are your chaverim? So an 18-year-old goes to prison. He committed his first marijuana offense, or whatever it is. He's surrounded with rapists, child molesters, murderers. The robbers are the least of it. So what are going to be the influences on him? In other words, a person is mushba by his seviva. So we take a young kid and we want him to do tshuva, so we send him to a place where everybody there has levels of rishus that are much, much worse than him. And that's why there's something called a recidivism rate, meaning the likelihood that if you've been in prison once, you're going to go back is very, very, very high. Because that was your seviva. That's what you picked up. That's what you learned. That's what influences you. There are actually, Baruch Hashem, there are exceptions. There are people who literally have turned their lives around, and sometimes even people who are on death row. They've turned their lives around, and even if it didn't buy them life, but they died, so to speak, as on some level of Balei Tshuva. But the vast majority is you just get worse and worse and worse and worse. So says the Rebbe, what does the Torah say? What is the prison system of the Torah? A guy is a Refuge. Now, granted, it's b'shegeg. But by definition, there's a sin here. What is his sin? He's indifferent. He's careless. He didn't care enough about human life to look both ways in the intersection. He needs to do tshuva. A shogeg needs tshuva. So where do we put him? We put him in a seviva of Talmidei Chachamim, of Kedusha, Levium. Who are the Levium? The Levium are the teachers of Am Yisrael. Remember, that's why we made the point that the 48 cities of the Levium are all over Eretz Yisrael, because we want their influence to be felt. So the Rebbe says, you see, that when somebody has to be removed from society, You don't remove them into an environment that is worse than the environment they came from. You move them to an environment that is better than the environment they came from, because that way it could be a positive influence on them. Now, granted, if somebody is mamish and dangerous, like mass murder, you're not going to release them into a community, but the Rebbe was suggesting that for different types of crimes that are not dangerous, maybe there should be some community involvement where they can be influenced in a good and positive direction to get education or whatever it will be. And this is the lekach. This was a limud that was from Ohr Miklat. So remember, the Rotsayach is not bereft. The Rotsayach can never leave until the Kohen Gadol dies. That means he's not Ola Regel. He doesn't go to his mother's funeral. Can't do it. He has to be there. Actually, technically, it is interesting. The Ohr Miklat had walls around him. But there's also a Techum, 2,000 Amma radius around the Ohr Miklat. So the truth of the matter is, he is protected from the Goral Adam if he's in the Techum of the Ohr Miklat, even if he's not in the Ohr Miklat itself. So if he walks and he stays within 2,000 Ammas of the Ohr Miklat, now again, this doesn't mean de facto he's safe. The guy may still kill him. That's a separate thing. But halachically, the Goral Adam does not have the right to kill him if he's within the Techum. So if he's within 2,000 Amos, he's safe. 1 foot outside of the 2,000 Amos, he is vulnerable. He can be killed with impunity. So I guess he does have a little bit of space to travel. He can walk outside of the Ohr Miklat, 2,000 Amos, but he is stuck in that city. Remember, the Mishnah says fascinating things. The Mishnah says that if a Talmud of a yeshiva, imagine this, a Talmud of a yeshiva kills somebody b'shogeg and has to go to the Ohr Miklat, the whole yeshiva has to relocate. The yeshiva has to move to the Ohr Miklat. Why? Because the Torah says, "He shall go to the Ohr Miklat and live." And what is life without my yeshiva? What is life without my Rebbe? Now, the difference is that at night, after Seder, the Rebbe and the yeshiva can go home. They don't have to stay in the Ohr Miklat. They can go home. But every day, they got to come to him. And same thing with the Rebbe. If God forbid a Rebbe kills b'shogeg, the yeshiva comes to the Rebbe, because how could you take away his yeshiva? Eino chinami. They can go to Ben Yehuda Street for lunch or whatever it will be. They're not stuck in the Ohr Miklat, but they have to come, because what is a Rebbe's life without Talmidim to teach? What is a Talmud's life without his Rebbe, without his yeshiva? Yeah.
Yeah, so in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, right, there's also references to Beit Yisuri, right? So people would be bound in prisons, right? There were certain penitentiaries that they put people in for certain crimes.
Well, the truth is, we don't really see this on a regular basis. The Rambam writes that there are extraordinary things. For example, habitual offenders, people who commit the same avera over and over and over again, could be imprisoned. That was an ad hoc decision. That was not part of the regular punishment for crimes in the Torah. It was the Sanhedrin could decide that we need some extraordinary punishments for habitual offenders and the like. Yeah.
The Rav said that every Ohr Miklat was a levite city. Was it the other way too? Was that
Yes. So let me clarify this. Perek Chaf of Yoshua, as well as the Torah, describes 6 Ohr Miklat, 3 over the Yarden and 3 west of the Yarden. So you'd read it and you'd only see 6. However, Chazal tell us in Maseches Makos that all of the 48 Levite cities, there actually were 48 Ohr Miklat. Every Levite city was an Ohr Miklat. So every Ohr Miklat was a Levite city, and every Levite city was an Ohr Miklat. So you may ask a very obvious question. If all 48 are Ohr Miklat, then what is special about the 6? Why do we say there are 6 Ohr Miklat plus another 42? There are 48 Ohr Miklat. So the Gemara says the following. All 48 are Orei Miklat, but the difference is the 6 have a koach to protect even if the guy doesn't know he's in an Ohr Miklat. Now, how do you know that? I have no idea. Meaning, let's say a guy killed B'shogeg and he's running away from the Goel Adam that's kind of, chasing him. But he doesn't know, and he just runs into a city and seeks refuge, but he doesn't know what the city is. He doesn't know it's an Ohr Miklat. And the Goel Adam kind of goes into the city and kills him. So the Gemara says it depends on whether he wandered into the 6 or wandered into the 42. The 6 provide protection even if he did not have an awareness he was in an Ohr Miklat. The 42, the other 42, provide protection only if he knew. Now, how is that going to be proven in trial? I mean, let's look at the Mitzvah, right? A guy runs into an Ohr Miklat. Goel Adam comes after him and kills him. So the Goel Adam is going to be arrested and is going to be brought before the Sanhedrin of 23 to be judged. Now he says, you're guilty of murder. Let's assume there was even a warning, let's say. Right? You're guilty of murder. What's your defense? So his defense is going to be, I killed a guy who didn't know he was in an Ohr Miklat. And it's one of the 42. Well, but he's going to have to prove that. So I have no idea exactly how he's going to prove that, but that's the yesod. If the Goel Adam kills the Refuge in one of the 42 cities, under conditions where the Refuge did not know he was in an Ohr Miklat, the Goel Adam is pater. If the Goel Adam killed him in one of the 6 Orei Miklat, the Goel Adam will be chayav even if the Refuge didn't know. So that, the Gemara in Mako says, is the nafkamina between the 6 and the 42. Yeah.
We never use what the Rebbe said about, like, the idea of prison, that it wouldn't be a fitting part to explain why the Mazid doesn't get to go to the Ohr Miklat, because it just doesn't make sense. It's like that person doesn't do shul, maybe he's dangerous, or maybe that person is sort of, they said that's not going to be a good takana for going, the Ohr Miklat is not going to fix the problem that he has. But by showing it, that's the sort of person that has ability, that's where that Ohr Miklat is going to have influence and fix it.
No, that I think makes perfect sense, and I think that's 100% right. The problem that bothers me, though, is the fact that he's not vulnerable to the Goel Adam. Meaning to say, it's a little peculiar to me that a shogeg can be killed by the Goel Adam, unless you're going to say this. It's possible to say that the shogeg is vulnerable to the Goel Adam because he's not keeping his chiyuv to be in the Ohr Miklat. If the Mezid doesn't have a chiyuv to be in the Ohr Miklat, in other words, the vulnerability of the Goel Adam is connected to your obligation to go to the Ohr Miklat. Okay, but again, it's something to think about, that anomaly, right? So that's the nafkrina. So in truth, there are not just 6 Orei Miklat. In truth, there are 48 Orei Miklat. And as I say, the Levite Rebbe saw in the institution of Ohr Miklat a kind of precedent for a penal philosophy of incarceration that one should think about al pi halacha, and he was advocating it for general society because he was saying that general society can learn from the Torah how to structure a type of system. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to